Yeah.
Were we supposed to get 5 copies of each item? I couldn't find anything different. Let me tell you.
Here's my,
I'll be all right.
Well, the big hand says 6 o'clock, so let me open the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on this Tuesday, January the 7th. Welcome your attendance. We do have a quorum. As far as I know, we should have the other 2 commissioners show up. Kirsten, have you heard anything that they would not? Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome our newest commissioner, David Rogers, his first meeting, and so welcome to Planning and Zoning. So,
Thank you.
okay. So that's the call to order, and first item is the adoption of the agenda. What's your pleasure, gentlemen?
I move we adopt the agenda.
Second?
I'm going to abstain. I was not at this capacity.
Or you can
I
react.
did attend.
It's this agenda that we're approving
Oh, yeah.
tonight.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Raise your right hand. Okay. All right, old business, minutes for the meeting of, this is our first meeting since November. So we haven't had anything since then. So the minutes are included, and Tom, what's your pleasure?
I move that we adopt the minutes of November 5th as submitted here.
And you can't participate.
Yeah, I would
since you were
abstain
not-
from that.
Well, it's seconded, but then we only have 2 of us, so we really can't approve the minutes, so. Okay,
We can defer these then till the next meeting.
yeah, we'll have to. All right, new business. First item is the election of the Planning and Zoning Chairman and Vice Chairman, so we have enough people to do that, so.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate John Hannaback to be chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the coming year.
I'll second that motion.
Well, thank you. All in favor? Very good. And for vice chairman, I would nominate Tom Flowers. For a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Technically, they don't even need a second.
I guess if you're not in attendance, bad
We
things
could
can
pick on
happen.
these other guys instead. Okay.
Okay. All right, the next item then is Popeyes, and so Ron, you're up.
Good evening, is this on? Good evening, council. Good evening, planning commission members, if I can get it out.
All right.
Tonight we have an application for, it's VA-06-19 for Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen. The applicant is applying for a rezoning in order to change a council-imposed condition that was placed on the property. There was a number of conditions, a total of 5 that the council imposed and that the planning commission also recommended to the council at the time of the initial meeting for annexation and rezoning for this parcel. The parcel is a 50.04 acre tract located at 100 Hickory Level Road. And for the record, the parcel number is 1680190. The original development application was approved on August 6, 2019 by the Planning Commission and August 27th, 2019 by the City Council for a Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen restaurant on the northeast corner of Hickory Level Road and Highway 61 as a part of AMMEX-01-19/RA-05-19 for the record. The Planning Commission and City Council imposed the condition to have an interparcel and interparcel connectivity of the 50-acre site along with sidewalks. The applicant has cited that there's some engineering complications because of topographic conditions, which makes it unfeasible to have that condition placed on the property and adequately satisfied. The applicant is requesting relief of that condition specifically in order to move forward with the development. The applicant is here tonight if there's any technical questions or if you need any clarification as to why those sidewalks can't be put in and the connectivity between the parcel and any future development that might happen on the rest of the 50-acre tract can occur.
Questions for staff?
Yes, I have one, how much acreage is left in the site after you take out the Popeyes site?
I may have to actually defer to the applicant specifically. Let me see if I have a map in here for you. Sure.
Hey, my name's Connor Patton. I'm the applicant. I'm representing Sissy Properties, who's the developer on this project. The remaining parcel, so we're looking at taking up about 0.92 acres for the Popeyes parcel. The remaining parcel will be about 49 acres. So we're looking to just get relief for this 0.92 acre parcel. The existing two stipulations that Ron talked about will stay in place for the remaining 49.
And then, so, once you take out the Popeyes site, what are your intentions or plans for accessibility to the remaining 49 acres? Are you gonna have a entrance off of 61, or is it all gonna come off of Hickory Level, or what? And are you gonna, I haven't seen a grading plan either. Up there at the top of that hill, there's a lot of above grade dirt in there. Are you guys gonna level that off and move that dirt back down in the hole?
On the other 49 acres?
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for the owner, but I don't know their plans. I know that Highway 61 right there is a limited access GDOT road. So
Right.
They can only have access from our discussion with GDOT. They can only have access across from South Carroll right there at the intersection. So they're most likely not going to be able to get something unless they somehow change those conditions, which they basically sold away their rights in the past.
So
And
basically,
those 2 points.
basically their only egress is gonna be off Hickory Level.
Hickory Level and the single access point on Highway 61 for
Okay.
the remaining 49 acres. And from there, you'll obviously have to have interparcel connectivity there. That's why I want to keep that in place, because that will obviously be met with future developments on the 49 acres. But from our acre standpoint, we've got the Colonial Pipeline going right there. From our discussions with Colonial Pipeline, Kevin Rayleigh over there, we've had numerous discussions with him, and we cannot grade over the Colonial Pipeline easement. You can put pavement on it, but you can't grade over it. So in order to get our site to work on our side for our small portion, we had to lower it a certain amount to be able to get a driveway to it, and for it to be feasible, to have an entrance to it. And then, we can't really, it's not feasible to get a driveway access over to the remaining 50 acres. And we've talked about with Councilman Monahan is with this as well, and staff like Bobby Elliott and others, and just kind of seemed like the best idea to come back in and request a variance or not variance, but removal of those two conditions for the site.
Again, there's nothing new here. You knew this previously, right? I mean, you knew what the topography was.
We had an idea, from walking the site, but we did not have a full topographic survey back, and we did not have our full civil design completed yet. We typically don't start that until after the rezoning process, and we get approved before we start spending more money. So at that point, when we were approved with those conditions, that's when we started our civil design process. And from there, we completed our grading plan, our grading design, and then we saw that we have some issues we need to take care of.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I'm understanding in the future, you'll connect the Popeyes to the 49.
That's the thing. We've got the Colonial Pipeline right there on the south property line of the Popeyes parcel. So that parcel is kind of, tough to connect with the other 49 parcels. Our intention was to have our Popeyes parcel and then, keep these all 5 stipulations, which we're meeting 3 of the 5, but the other 2 that we will not be meeting, keep all the 5 in place for the remaining 49 acres, which will have interparcel connectivity and sidewalks interconnecting. Just based on the topography of the site and where it's located with the easement right there and the pipelines, without relocating the pipelines, which is obviously very expensive and not very feasible. It's kind of just a piece of land that, if not developed, is going to sit there as trees for a while, and it might not be able to be developed, feasibly unless you have the access off Hickory level, and and not have access across the Colonial Pipeline.
Now, your plan is to come in and level that 0.9 acres? I mean, that,
Not completely level it. We've got like 20 feet of grade change on the site, so.
it's a big hill.
Yes, sir, it is. It's huge, and we're kind of meeting in the middle. We're cutting the site down far enough to where we can get a driveway access up to it, but we're not cutting it down too far to where we're encroaching and impacting the Colonial Pipeline. So we're kind of right in the middle of Hickory Level Road, the Colonial Pipeline, and we're kind of down the middle where we're grading up to the pipeline and grading down to the roadway.
This seemed more attractive to me when it included the 50 acres. And by excluding this, I'm not so sure that it's as attractive as it was previously.
We've never had shown, interparcel connectivity to the remaining 50 acres with this development. Maybe that was something that someone brought up previously. Back in August, we were just, proposing our one driveway entrance on the corner of Hickory Level, which lines up with the car dealership across the Hickory Level. And, the intent was the remaining 49 acres to be developed by a large shopping center or something like that with interparcel connectivity and sidewalks throughout and stuff like that. Once that at a later date, but we're only purchasing the 0.92 acres, so I don't have any impact on the remaining 49 acres. That's the owner still owns that area. The original property owner that we're
Right.
separate from.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, back to Ron, I guess.
Thank you.
And also, for the record, we were, as you heard tonight, as far as the parcel, we're referring to a Popeyes parcel, right? So when it first originally came to you, it was an entire 50-acre
Right,
tract. Now that has been subdivided off, and that has been completed as of December through the city's engineer and sent to the tax assessor, and they've completed that change. So I didn't want any confusion amongst the commission or the public, but that actually has been split off already, and the existing zoning and conditions is currently on that property, on both properties.
any other questions or comments? What's the commission's pleasure?
Are there any public comments?
I'm sorry, being new at this. Yes, let's open it up for public comments. Anybody has any comments, please come forward.
Larry Kors, 115 Maple Valley Drive, Villa, Georgia, 30180. Not having seen where the pipeline sits on the parcel tonight, I know it hasn't moved. I will have to make some kind of off-the-wall comments. I don't see why the applicant should be given waiver from the requirements to have connectivity, simply because they've got the pipeline, which is up by the road. I don't see where that is going to keep them from putting down a sidewalk along the public right-of-way, which is the point of the part of this discussion was to have a someone else put in, not the city pay for and put in sidewalks as we go forward into the development phase. Connectivity, as you rightly say, from the point of the hill being an obstacle is not an obstacle. Steps are used many, many times, many, many places. The city has even put in steps within the last year on a parcel that they own for a sidewalk. So while this is a cost issue, it's a minor cost issue. And I think you're gonna find also on the connectivity on the road, that the road is gonna be the major entrance point off of Hickory Level, while it will be for the moment, will be for the restaurant, for this current applicant. It will then also be available to the other parcel and to any subdivisions therein. So we need to make sure that we've got everything going forward tight, where we want it now, the way we want to see it. We're trying to go forward with a pedestrian-friendly sites and a pedestrian-friendly town, as in the walking trails, as we've planned. We need to remember that we've got to get the people off the walking trails up to the places to do business. And of course, this would be one of the places that I would think people would want to come to for a break, would be for lunch or for a meal, for dinner, would be to come to this particular applicant's restaurant. So let's keep that in mind, that we do have to have connectivity. And I believe that the council spoke correctly, and that that you, as the Planning and Zoning Board, should continue and affirm the position of the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other comments? Public comments? Come forward. Go ahead.
I'd just like to address some. So as far as ADA compliance and having steps as connectivity, ADA has some very strict requirements as far as putting sidewalk in the right of way and having a sidewalk connection to your site as a requirement. If you were to place sidewalk in the right of way, you have to have a sidewalk going to your store if it's part of the same development. So as part of that, you can't really have steps. You have to have ramps that are under about 8 1/3%, and flat landings, handrails, and to get from Hickory Level Road up to our proposed Popeyes, you're looking at about 300 feet of ramps, so a football length field of ramps with handrails and switchbacks. And that's just based off our grading plan, which I'd be happy to share with you. The gas pipeline that we're concerned with is not in the right of way. It's down to the south of the parcel, kind of cutting through, separating the 0.92 acres from the larger 50-acre parcel. And then as far as, with the intention of the City Council, I've spoken with Councilman Montmahan. His intention was really for the majority of the 50 acres. I've spoken on the phone multiple times. He understands that our parcel is a little, separate. It's up in the corner. He was going to be in favor of this, I believe, at the upcoming council meeting. And I've spoken with him, and he understands that these conditions were brought up, and we didn't have time to speak after he brought up the conditions at the previous planning commission back in August of last year. And as far as the other conditions on the site, the other 3 conditions, we are proposing a very nice looking brick facade building, a landscape plan proposing 28 trees, which is far above the code minimum as he requested, and then also a master signage plan that includes ground mounted monument signs. So we tried to meet the intent of his conditions as much as we could, and I wish he could be here tonight to speak on it, but so I just wanted to kind of bring that up real quick to kind of straighten everything out and make sure everyone is clear about what we're really asking for. So thank you.
Does that easement run east-west or north-south?
It's kind of northwest to southeast, kind of almost more east to west. Kind of just maybe 200 feet south of the intersection. So when you're driving down, you see the big clearing with the yellow posts and everything. That's where the easement cuts through. So it's on our southern property line of the 0.92 acres.
Yeah.
So kind of separating the 0.92 from the remainder of the 50-acre parcel.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Ron Barber, 571 West Bankhead Highway, I guess. David wasn't here when this was originally discussed, but the way that these conditions, these last two conditions came about were from Councilman Montahan. That's why he keeps getting mentioned in this. And the genesis of this process of coming back and asking for rezoning came from Bobby, because when he looked at the plan and saw what would be required to do ADA, it wasn't that it can't be done, it's just, we ask ourselves, if we were doing the development, is that an obligation that we would have wanted to meet ourselves? And neither one of us could say in good conscience that it seemed practical, even though it's possible. And if you're thinking about where this pipeline is, since it's in the ground, it's one of those things you don't pay attention to, but the pipeline cuts across Hickory Level and is also the south boundary of Holiday Inn Express. So if you drive down Hickory, hotel's on your right, there's a big sodded area between the hotel and the road, and that's the pipeline. And it continues through the middle of Hickory Falls apartment complex. So when you're at that point on Hickory Level looking west, you're looking down the pipeline through the apartment complex, and two sets of buildings are above it and two sets of buildings are below it. So it's a significant feature out there, and it impacts a lot of those parcels in terms of how they can be developed. So anyway, so Bobby is sort of the genesis of this, you know, reconsideration of conditions. We've talked to Matt. I think he's on board with what we're trying to do. The other thing, David, I think that sort of confused this is we did the annexation as a thing, right? The whole 50 acres with their specific conditions of zoning, which sort of, to me, muddied how you think about it. Because really the conditions that we applied to them won't necessarily be what y'all recommend, you know, for the next thing that gets built out there. Because it'll be on the other side of the pipeline, and who knows what y'all will recommend. So I think we maybe unintentionally confused the issue some with that. So you got questions about that? I mean, that's my take on.
Well, it certainly is
What's going on?
confusing. And you know, that other 50 acres is going to take a lot of work.
1 million cubic feet of dirt is what I'm hearing.
Well, look, almost looks to me like you could come in for the 0.9 acres, which is a big hill, and level that up, push all that dirt into the hole.
If it weren't for the pipeline.
So,
Yeah, the pipeline acts like a barrier, so I mean, most of the ingress egress will be from that South Carroll
And
red light.
the requirements for all of this sidewalk and interconnectivity and everything was not a P and Z requirement, that was a council requirement. So
Came from Matt.
I think,
And the monument sign and you know,
I think I'm gonna recommend that we return it to council and let them do it at whatever their pleasure is.
well, and your pleasure is to approve this and send it on to council with our approval? I mean, that's basically what you're saying.
It was also voted on and approved at this board as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think so. I think we just approve this, we'll approve to recommend this change based on this request, and then council can decide how they want to deal with it, because they were the ones who put this requirement on it in the first place.
Well, of course, they do anyway, so.
They do, so.
Ron, I have a question as far as the traffic, and I did read staff's comments on that, but what's your opinion on what that's gonna do to traffic on Hickory Level right there? I mean, it's already very congested during peak hours.
right, from what I understand with my conversations with Bobby, I think ideally, we would have liked to see an entrance and an exit off of both sides, both from Highway 61 and Hickory Level, but GDOT also, correct me if I'm wrong, also has requirements and would not approve something like that because it's too close to that intersection. So I would assume that there would be queuing at that traffic light from the Hickory Level side going eastbound on Hickory Level at the intersection. These types of restaurants have very high turnover with customers and with queuing in their individual driveway lines. And I don't know offhand how much queuing space that they have going around the building, if it's a single wrap, double driveway, et cetera. I think the applicant can speak to that. But I did see only one queuing line for the driveway in itself. So there's parking that's there. There's a relatively large amount of parking for one restaurant with turnover. So I don't think that would become a major issue as far as congestion inside of that parking lot. Only at a peak hour, like a lunchtime type of situation, which we already see all around the city, from Taco Bell to McDonald's to Chick-fil-A, right? So I don't really see that as becoming a real issue on the site. Off the site, there will probably be a small increase of queuing during peak time.
Thank you.
Willie, any comments? Motion?
I move that we approve this request and recommend it to city council for their action.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved that we approve and send this forth to council. All in favor? Okay. Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Okay. Next item is the zoning ordinance.
Good evening, Commissioners, and Happy New Year to you all. It's good to be back. I have three items, actually three sub-items under one heading. Going back to where we are currently with the adoption of the Villa Rica zoning ordinance. I wanted to first highlight some of the changes that have been made to the draft document after going through the Planning Commission review process or recommendation. I've outlined those in a handout for you, but to the benefit of the public and the viewers at home. The first two items that were fairly significant were the reallocation of the authority to grant variances and special exceptions from the City Council to the Planning Commission. And there has been some very active discussion with respect to this item. That was a recommendation that came out of the Planning Commission to the City Council. The second one was related to a section on parking for people with disabilities to make very clear what's otherwise required with the American Disabilities Act, which is actually, excuse me, codified along with our development codes, but it would just supplement the zoning ordinance by making sure that that was clear and available to developers. Some of the more substantive changes that were recommended by the City Council related to the number of amenities that are required in larger single-family subdivision developments. There was an opportunity where, if you think about the multifamily zoning that we have, the more amenities that you add to a development, the greater your density can increase. We wanted to provide the same allowance for single-family residential developments, trying to steer single-family subdivisions away from just using PUD zoning, which is about 90%, actually in the city, about 70% of all residential developments are PUDs. PUDs are a very tailored zoning. It allows developers to dictate what the setbacks are going to be, how small the lots are going to be. There's no general conformity amongst PUDs. So what I'll get to in the future in looking at the zoning districts and adding new residential zoning options, to try to dissuade developers from just going into PUD or planned development, excuse me. The next item is with respect to residential design standards. We have fairly unsubstantial general design standards that were adopted by, that are being proposed to be adopted by the city. There is a minimum requirement that developers meet at least 4 of those design standards. Of the list that's provided, it was a short list. So working with Councilmember Monahan, we were able to extend the provisions of that list to include additional architectural features and to increase the minimum number of architectural elements from 4 up to 6 to encourage a higher quality of design and aesthetic. The third very significant section is adding some very substantial design requirements to PUDs or planned developments. What we have seen, especially here recently in driving around looking at what's being built in these planned developments, there seems to be quite a tendency towards kind of a cookie cutter aesthetic. You may have structures, residential structures that are dominated by garages, where you might have a double car garage and then you have like a little, 5-foot entry on the side that's recessed. It's just really not very good design. I think that we can do better, and I think that if we are allowing developers the flexibility to more or less craft their own zoning through the plan development process, that the city should be getting something in return with respect to a better aesthetic quality product. I think it's a good trade-off. Otherwise, there are other zoning options for them to consider if they choose not to rise to that level of quality. But I wanted to make sure that that was in there.
As I've ridden around recently, looking at some of the new housing stock, it's occurred to me, you got so many competing issues at one time. The developer wants to get as many lots as they can possibly get out of a piece of property. And of course, that simply increases the density and doesn't give the builder, who's usually separate from the developer, because the developer will sell lots to the builders, doesn't give the builder the flexibility of doing what they might want to in terms of aesthetics. But yet he has certain market requirements that buyers are going to want to require in order to be interested in his finished product. And so I've noticed one of the things, just exactly what you said, you have the front elevation is dominated by the garage, and then you got this little tiny entranceway stuck over here on the side. But you're already dealing with which looks like a 10-foot sideline setback. I don't know what is the new code for.
It really varies on the zoning district. I think to your point, one additional thing I want to add to what you're saying, in some of these developments, you may have a single-car garage, and the setback's 15 feet. You go drive through these developments, you see nothing but cars out everywhere.
Yeah.
Because there's nowhere to put them.
Right.
I think the community deserves a lot better than that. And I think we should hold ourselves to a better standard than that because, they can continue to sprawl out west. We're not an island. They can go to Carroll County or Douglas County unincorporated or Douglasville or whoever. But I think we owe it to ourselves and for our responsibility to the community to require good design, good quality.
I agree, because some of these I drive through them and look at them, and 100 years ago, I used to build a few houses and right at the end of the Vietnam War, and the things we were building and selling for $20,000, 3-bedroom, bath and a half or 2 baths, full brick. Now, we didn't have garages, we had carports because it was in South Georgia. But, you know, you can't even clear the lot for 20 grand these days. And I see things out there being built for 250,000, and I think it's a good thing the interest rates are low. Because they couldn't sell them otherwise, but, I don't want a lot of things crammed in and crowded together, but by the same token, I don't want to tie the hands of the builders and developers. They've got to be able to meet the requirements of the marketplace. And I'm glad to see you are considering these factors, but I don't know, I don't have a magic answer. Let me back up just a minute too. In a couple of these items above, what, for instance, are some of the additional amenities that provide an excess of the minimum for an increase in density? What all are the amenities that you typically see just the bare minimum of, and then what are the things that you would like to see added on above that?
Well, one of the things we did was we looked at the multifamily zoning, which has a much longer list of amenity options. Just based on their type of development, they could have something like a computer cafe or a rooftop terrace or something like that that you really can't get in a single-family development. So we looked at some of the things that were not on the list under the current UDC to look at more of a modernization of amenity packages that we may find in higher quality single-family developments. Those might include sports courts, clubhouses, community gardens. There was just a longer list of options that could be considered for actually increasing the requirements of more amenities, giving a wider spectrum of options for the developers to
So
consider.
you're talking about more community amenities rather than individual to each lot?
Correct. Yes.
All right.
So as the council member who sponsored this section of legislation wanted to go from a minimum threshold of 4 amenities up to 6, and I said, well, if we're going to do that, we need to increase the options that are available that the developers can choose from. Otherwise, it'll just be the swimming pool and the golf course, which are, you know, you can't build a golf course in every residential subdivision. So some things on the list were kind of impractical. We just wanted to make sure that it was fair and added some additional options for developers. In the interest of time, let me just finish this out because I have a presentation I'd like to make, and then we have something I need the commission to vote on. The next item was the lapse of rezoning due to development activity. That was one I've gotten a lot of support from. And that's also something that we'll get into in the presentation because there are a number of projects that were zoned that never happened. And they still have the old zoning on them. And it may not be appropriate for that, 10 years down the line when something else comes along and wants to go to a location. But I'll get into that in a minute. A large section on administrative plats. This is in the existing Unified Development Code, and we wanted to make sure that that was carried over to the current code. That was a staff recommendation or a staff addition. And then just some additional definitions for clarification on items that were either already in the new code and needed to be clarified or items that were added with respect to the administrative plats. So that just kind of gets you kind of up to speed on where we are in the draft itself. The problem is we ran into a bit of a hiccup because until we adopt the new zoning ordinance, we're stuck with the old one, which we're painfully trying to get rid of. And one of the requirements of the current ordinance is that any zoning action that's taken doesn't matter whomever is the sponsor or the applicant, there are certain notification criteria which must be addressed. And that makes sense for like the Popeyes development, the annexation, where they notified every property owner surrounded by certified mail. However, when you're doing a citywide zoning initiative that not doesn't substantially affect, but the terms of the ordinance does have an impact on it if it goes from, if it goes from rural development to agricultural. It's sort of a lateral transition, but it is an impact on the zoning of the property. And according to our ordinance, we would have to send a certified letter to that property owner as well as post a sign in their yard. Well, we've got 6,687 parcels that we would have to individually notice and individually post in accordance with our ordinance. I took our ordinance and ran it by a very prominent Atlanta zoning attorney. And his comment was that really there's nothing we could do about it because it's in our code, but that it was the most restrictive public notification ordinance he has seen in any jurisdiction in the region, and he's been working in zoning for 30 years in Metro Atlanta. So not surprisingly, what we've got is broken. Not surprisingly, what we're doing is trying to fix it. And I have a recommendation at the conclusion of the presentation that would address that by adding a caveat which would address the situation where the city is the initiator of the zoning action citywide. So with that, I would like to just continue with the presentation. I've
Before
prepared.
you do that, Chris, you had made a comment about the first one where we had asked the approval for our consideration of variances and special exceptions. You said that there were some feedback, apparently negative, that you had gotten.
No, not negative. Actually, I think at this point, the city council members that I have spoken to are reflective of the value of having the planning commission take on some or both of those recommendations. It has not been publicly deliberated yet, so I don't really know where they are as a collective board on that. But I have had a conversation with at least one council member that said, well, maybe that's not such a bad idea. And I said, well, it can be done. The reason why it was done this way was because of history and some things that had occurred. So it's something I'm sure we'll have some spirited discussion on Thursday. So if you're available Thursday, please attend the council meeting so you can express your vision on why that should be.
Well, we had proposed that because regardless, if we hear those variances or exemptions, whatever we do goes to the council at any rate. And so they have to ultimately approve it.
I think
So-
what they were looking at it as more of a variance or variances specifically would stop with the commission. And that if there was something that the council didn't like, or if the person did not like the outcome, they could appeal it to the city council. So I think what the council's looking at least from the legislative standpoint, was that the planning commission would be the decision-making body for variance requests. However, because special exceptions are basically conditions of zoning, those would need to go to the city council for approval. So what I can see happening on this one is if they would be willing to concede the variances to the planning commission, but still preside over the special exceptions, as they do under conditional uses currently. So we'll see what happens. I don't have my future-looking glass. I'm trying to think of the word for that.
Well, Chris, this whole activity is just Herculean
Oh, I know.
in undertaking. You are to be commended for this work. And of course, this is what, we started with, and it's been changed considerably.
Yeah.
But this has been so needed for years. And there have been many times when I've looked at the UDC and we just don't have the information included there. In fact, one of the areas is the definition of this commission. I mean, where is it defined other than in the UDC? So you're to be lauded for this, a tremendous undertaking and a lot of work, and congratulations and thank you.
Well, thank you. I was expecting that we would be nearing the finish line around the end of January, but it looks like we're going to be pushed back to the first meeting in March because of the public notification requirement of the UDC. So that was a bit of a disappointment, but we do what we do, So,
Proceed.
thank you. All right, switching gears, and I'm going to try to be expeditious about this. If you look on the first slide, this will take you back to.
Chris, we can't see the slides.
We don't have
I-
slides.
Did you guys get a printout?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you just follow along, I'll try to kind of hold it. Just for the benefit of the public and the viewing public as well.
Are you talking about this?
Yes. We started this process by doing a forensic audit of our existing Unified Development Code, which is vis-a-vis the zoning ordinance for the city. And in the residential zoning alone, which makes up roughly 60 or 70% of all parcels in the city, we noted that there was a significant number of non-conforming just because the zoning code was not reflecting what was being built or what had been historically been built. For example, under rural development, which is a large agricultural residential zoning district, almost 30% of all the properties in the city were non-conforming. Single-family residential properties, roughly 40% of all the properties in the city did not conform with our current zoning. Multifamily, almost 50% did not, and remarkably, residential townhouse zoning, 100% of all the townhouse properties in the city were not compliant. This was an obvious problem with respect to our existing zoning, and that we knew that we had to fix not only the underlying zoning, but how the zoning was applied. The next slide will show you our current zoning map. You can see there's a significant amount of planned unit development, which shows up in the purple, more or less around the periphery of the city. The central core being downtown and the surrounding residential neighborhoods. And then if you switch to the next map, which is the proposed zoning map, aside from some color changes, there are a number of noteworthy recommendations as far as actual zone changes. And even this map is a bit fluid because Ron and I were talking today about one property down by Charleston Place, which is owned by Ingalls, which is zoned for planned development when there's never been a planned development planned or submitted. So there's a lot of stuff that we're still catching and having to fix. If you go to the next slide, you can see a side-by-side comparison of the old zoning and the new zoning, but more importantly, the right-hand half of the page kind of does a general comparison between the old and the new, and in most cases, there's really not a substantive change or a substantive difference between one zoning district and another. The more important things would be the addition of R2, which is a smaller, more in-town residential lot size. The MF2, which is a higher density multifamily zoning district. And then the consolidation of 3 additional districts, or actually 5 districts into 2 separate zoning districts, one being Central Business District, which is the same thing as the downtown overlays CBD. We've got the downtown overlay commercial mixed use, which all that stuff just goes to mixed use. There's really no point in having like 6 or 7 different subcategories, and the definitions don't match, and you can't figure out what the uses are in the UTC. It's just, it gets out of control. Just to make a point, with the higher density multifamily, there are no properties in the city that have been granted that zoning designation. That was something that we worked on when we started to work with Walton Development and the redevelopment of the public housing property across from Tanner, and just to have an option available so that they would not have to go through the plan unit development process. Everyone goes through the PUD process because they can't find something that matches the zoning. So we fix the zoning, we fix the problems.
Now, you said there were 5 that were merged into CMU.
Well, there were 5 that were downtown overlay.
Yeah, what happened with CBD? That
CBD
remains CBD?
Well, CBD, downtown overlay, Central Business District just turned into Central Business District. You know, that was really more like a semantics
Okay.
change.
Okay.
And the same for the multifamily, single-family, commercial, and commercial mixed use just all fell under commercial mixed use.
Okay.
And those are really, you find those really along the 78 South Carroll kind of corridors, closer to the downtown core. So it's not a real sprawling area with a lot of properties. It's really more of a specialty area. So looking at the next slide, just an overview of the issues that we were experiencing with the need to realign the permissible uses for each of the zoning districts. The application of zoning on incompatible land uses. For example, over the Fullerville neighborhood, there are single-family residential homes with single-family houses on them that, for no good reason, are zoned light industrial. It's sort of a bleeding effect of surrounding uses that somehow made their way onto the zoning map. You know, maybe 20 years ago, they thought that there was going to be an expansion, which never happened. We see that actually quite a bit. I'll point that out a bit later. There's a lack, in a lot of cases, just a lack of a transition between higher density, higher intensity land uses and adjacent single-family residential or adjacent agricultural zoning. Very importantly, large zoned parcels that were never developed. We see that actually quite a bit, and sort of zone it, and they will come in anticipation, people wanting their property to be zoned commercial because maybe it's going to make them a lot of money in the future, and they just sit on it. It goes into squalor. I mean, there's all sorts of examples of that happening. Zoning densities greater than necessary or as built. You've got small mom and pop operations that are zoned the same as Walmart. It doesn't make any sense. It needs to be adjusted so that the uses and the footprints of the zoning actually match what's on the ground. Excessive use of overlays. We have so many overlays. We have a highway district. We have a medical district overlay. We have overlays we don't even use. We've never used them. And then the zoning categories that, I'm trying to think what my note was, that were misapplied, where you've got, you know, a industrial property that's zoned commercial or a commercial use that's zoned office institutional, or, you know, things are just miszoned.
Before you go on, let me go back to the previous page.
Sure.
Where you say you've created a new zone with multifamily too, and yet your footnote says there are no properties therein zoned.
That's right. So what we've done is we've put the option on the books. And it's up to a future developer that may want to do a high-quality multifamily development that maybe needs up to X number of units per acre, that it gives the council the tool and the planning commission the tool to at least consider that without having to go through a PUD process or something like that. Now, the PUD process requires that you have the site plans, you have all this architectural stuff done, a lot of stuff on the front end. Whereas if you had our MF2 as an option, they could just go ahead and apply for rezoning. And so that is just another tool in the toolbox for the commission and for the city council.
Where would the Walton properties fall in?
They would fall very specifically under the MF2. However, because the city wanted to see the inclusion of some street front commercial, then that was more of a mixed use type of concept development. Whether or not that actually panned out in the end, I don't recall. But I think that was the reason why they wanted to go ahead with the PUD, because they were up against a timeline or a deadline for their DCA funding for the project.
Yeah,
So-
that's certainly true. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But to your point, if it was absent the commercial component, that would have been a perfect MF2 project. So. Let me just ask you this. The next several slides give you specific examples of the types of rezonings that are going to be recommended. I believe in a separate handout, we have actually provided you with the specific list of properties. I think there's 88 or 89, 90 in total. What they're currently zoned, what their proposed zoning is, and why they're being recommended to change.
That's this.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I think we may have provided you with an electronic copy that has a 1 per page, which makes it a little easier to view. Just more expensive to print.
Well, but useful because you really can't, I can't read
Yeah,
much of anything on here,
Sure.
so.
I agree.
But I couldn't read much on the
Well-
downloaded one either.
The next several slides really kind of talk about some of the specific things that were identified in the handout, and what's wrong with them and why they need to change. I know that you can read that on your own, and I know it's getting late. I could go through those individually, but it would take a little time, so I thought I would leave that to your discretion.
I can't imagine we would want to go through these individually.
I move that we not.
Yeah, I understand. Well, just
It's
to
pretty self-explanatory.
Just to recap for the benefit of the public, in realigning the zoning and rewriting the zoning ordinance, we've gone through the draft that we've written so far has taken roughly 8 months to get to this point. And it's going to take us probably a full year to actually get it fully adopted. But once you get the ordinance written, you've got to actually put it on paper and put it on property and put it on land. And they're based on the changes that are in the permissible uses within the zoning district. Maybe it's more appropriate that it be something different. A good example would be, I believe it's Willowbrook. There's a sort of a nursing home with some independent living out off of just north of Dallas Highway, off of Harold Road. And it is currently zoned heavy commercial, general commercial. It seems to me that an office medical institutional zoning, which we already have an office institutional, would be much more appropriate for a medical senior assisted living type facility arrangement. So we're sort of shifting the zoning where what was formerly a general commercial would be more appropriate along with medical, along with Tanner, along with medical support, those types of things we're kind of regrouping into one new zoning district. Other significant modifications are going to be this sort of reset. It's a zoning reset on properties that were speculatively zoned, or maybe 20 years ago had a developer on the hook that they were going to do great things, and it just never materialized. From the perspective of the planning staff, we don't want to give away leverage of the planning commission or of the city council to a landowner by right. In other words, if I have a large piece of property and I have it zoned commercial and it sits there, you know, fallow for forever because it was never built, well, they shouldn't have the right to keep the zoning. Like when we discussed earlier about the reversion of zoning after 1 year of inactive development activity. So what we are doing in a lot of these cases is, for example, where 61 ends up off of, that's a Rockmart Road. Yeah, it's 61 kind of dead ends to it, the three-way stop. Well, the property that's straight ahead, it's all owned by Ingalls. Ingalls owns a lot of property in town because I think they're trying to keep out their competition. So the bypass is going through there. It's zoned for general commercial. Well, we know the road's going through. We don't know what's going to happen after that. We don't know how much is going to be left on one side or the other, or what would be appropriate for it to be there. So let's go ahead and neutralize it back to AG, because that's really what it is. It's just raw land. And then when it comes back for development, we have some leverage in saying, well, you want a rezoning, well, let's see what we can negotiate. But if you just automatically give them the cake and eat it too, then you don't have a dog in the fight, really. So that's one of the larger two items that you will see repeatedly on the list. And those 89 properties that I've identified in that long sheet, all of those property owners will be notified by certified mail as to the public hearing and the changes in the proposed zoning. So wanted to make those points.
So that will happen in spite of your recommendation of the change to
Yes, yes. The recommended change to the current Unified Development Plan would be to exempt, now this, I've seen this in other cities, would be to exempt the city from its own notification requirements when it's a city-initiated zoning I said that totally wrong. Exempt the city from its own requirements if it's a city-initiated zoning action. Specifically in this case only, where we're rezoning everything in the city. It does not impact if someone comes in and says, I want to rezone my piece of property. They still have to follow the current requirements. And this is also really just a stopgap to get us over this hurdle so that we can get the new ordinance adopted. And so basically what it says is the city is exempt from its own requirements. However, it is not exempt from state law. So we have all the requirements that are under the Georgia Planning Act that pertain to public notice that we still have to comply with. That just kind of clarifies that with the recommended text amendment. So in the interest of that, and as a segue, let me go to the next slide. This is what we're recommending, which goes on to the tail end of the existing Unified Development Code, which was provided. There's a section where I have said, insert text here,
Yeah, I didn't understand that.
just to make it real easy to figure out where it goes. And it's just a change that says, adds section number 6 to section 201, subsection B, regarding notification for the public record. Zoning text amendments and revisions of the zoning map, which are initiated by the city, shall not require the posting of signs on affected properties. Notice to the property owners shall be required where the rezoning will substantially affect the enjoyment or use of the property as currently developed, and shall not be based on projected or prospected financial gain on a property's future transaction. The city shall be exempt from the notifications of individual property owners adjoining the property being rezoned, but shall not be exempt from any requirements under zoning, Georgia's zoning procedures law. I think it's a fair way to kind of get around what is otherwise a self-imposed beyond a handicap. It basically just cuts you off at the knees and you can't move forward.
No, we don't have a copy of that.
Should be
Is it
in
in
your
here?
presentation. It's the second.
Well, no, the insert,
I'm sorry.
the thing that you said was to be inserted.
Yes.
Ah, okay, okay.
This is what we currently have in place. And we're just going on to what would be page 35 on that and inserting one last little caveat in there, as I just read.
Okay.
So, in conclusion, we have a request for an affirmative recommendation from the Planning Commission to amend Section 201, subsection B of the urban, I always refer to as the Unified Development Code, as was read by staff, as well as a recommendation for approval of the new official zoning map as amended, as articulated with respect to the properties that are going to be rezoned and with respect to the zoning action, justification for the zoning action as articulated. It'll be up to the city council, of course, to hold the next round of public hearings. But more importantly, until we make a change to the Unified Development Code, we can't really move forward with the ordinance. So that really is the most important thing. And that's about all I have to say.
Commission? Motion?
I move to recommend this to city council to approve this amendment to the, to section 2.01B of the Unified Development Code as provided by staff here tonight and the official zoning map.
Do you want to make that as two different motions?
Do they need to be?
I think for clarity, probably.
All right,
Yeah.
then take off the zoning map part.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
All in favor? Okay.
Now I move that we recommend approval of the new official zoning map.
And I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I have another question.
Did you put this together over lunch or something?
Yeah, just a whip.
Just whipped it right out?
Okay.
Okay.
I was gonna say, go ahead.
That was a lot of work, Chris.
Just a quick one. The zoning ordinance change will become part of UDC,
That's right.
but the rest of UDC is still got a lot of problems.
Oh, yes.
What is going to happen with the rest of UDC?
When this zoning ordinance is adopted, the UDC goes away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What we've done is we've taken the development regulations out of the UDC in the past and have created a development code. The only thing left in the UDC was the sign ordinance and the zoning. We've already taken the sign ordinance out.
Right.
So the only thing we have left is what's left over of a rather mucky zoning ordinance. So this will replace that. The reason why governments went to Unified Development Codes is that they felt that it gave them more protection, that if something was found unconstitutional in the code, that they couldn't just overthrow the entire government. I think we've come quite a long ways beyond that, and I think our sign ordinance was always the tricky one because it regulated content, which was unconstitutional. We've since fixed that. I think we've fixed the zoning substantially to get it to where it needs to be, and it does not need to be in the same ordinance as some of these other things like stormwater, soil erosion, land disturbance. All those things are in the development code, not in the zoning code.
Well, for instance, to go back to the comment I made earlier, UDC is the only place that defines the planning commission, terms, et cetera. Now, the council has changed the terms, but I don't know where that's documented. And if you eliminate the rest of UDC, it seems to me there's a need for a section in there that replaces the definition of,
It's in there. Your
doesn't define the terms.
yes, I believe it does, actually.
Well, I haven't seen
Yeah,
it.
I don't know if do you have your copy of the zoning ordinance with you?
I have the
Yes.
original one.
Yes. So there's a section in there on the planning commission, establishes the commission, sets the commissioner's terms, and it's gonna be probably towards the front
Yeah, it is,
administration.
but,
Probably
well,
easier to find but through the table of contents. But
well, I had looked at that and seemed to me it had a lot of shortcomings. Those are all my notations on it. Well, at any rate, we can talk,
okay,
we don't need to take up this time.
well,
Thank you very much,
Thank you all
Chris.
for your time.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to staff comments. Ron, you're back on.
Yes, I would actually want to start off by also commending my colleague Chris. He worked so hard on this, as you know, and as you've seen tonight. It's been painstaking, but with his efficiency and his expertise on this subject, it's come out fantastic. Couldn't have asked for a better. It's really a world-class ordinance. So I definitely thank him for that. We have a new item actually that I decided I actually wanted to share with you guys tonight. I've worked on a subdivision development map for approximately the last 2 months now. Upon coming here to Villa Rica, I noticed that we have a lot of data. We have a lot of GIS data. It's constantly being updated thanks to the county tax assessor in Carroll and Douglas. But we don't really know on the ground where a lot of our development is happening. I mean, we know in our minds, but we don't have that actually shown anywhere. We have it zoned a certain way, but we just have no dedicated resource to that. So I kind of embarked on the task of developing a map that would actually show what is in progress right now, what is under construction, what has been built, and it shows what permits have actually been issued, but maybe the land hasn't necessarily been developed just yet. So I actually brought a copy of that map here, and upon printing it out today for the first time at 5 o'clock, we noticed that some of the colors are a little harder to see, like orange and red, for example, next to each other is a little hard to see between the two. But I brought a copy of it, and I wanted to ensure that you knew about it before it goes live onto the city's website, which I hope to have done by sometime at close of day on Friday. I just want to switch around some of the colors, so I'll actually pass this one around just really quick so you guys can see it. But again, it does show permits, where they were issued, how they were issued, all of our developments. So, and this is not only to include the developments that are active right now, but where are there vacant lots and developments that may have stopped before the recession took place, or maybe even a long time ago there might be a whole lot of lots in an older subdivision that are not developed. A lot of developers ask if they call, where is all of our development happening? We want to get in on the action, but telling someone over the phone and saying, oh, well, the north side of town or the south side of town is having more development, it's much easier to actually show them the resource and show the public the resource as well, so they know where things are going, which can help us with infrastructure planning and the like. So pass this on to you guys. Sure. So you can see yellow, it's a little hard to see, but I'm going to be switching some of the colors around before it goes live. But the electronic version, you can see it very clearly. But the printed version, for some reason, it's, with color bleeding. You can see where some, like orange is a lot of vacant lots in Mirror Lake, for example, larger lots that are just sitting there. So we actually drove around, Chris and I, for multiple times, having to go to each and every one of these subdivisions to check and see where we are right now, in addition to the permit reports that we get every month from the permitting specialists. So you can see in some of the purple areas where future growth is expected because of phases that we already have in an office that we can see, and who owns it and the like, so.
Good, that's very
So
useful.
I'm gonna keep it
It
updated, as
is,
you
yeah.
see, it's January 2020, so it'll be updated monthly as I get those permit. Now that we know where it is, I can just easily click on each one, and
And so you're gonna load this on the website?
on the website, it'll be updated monthly.
And permit issue, you mean you had a building permit issue,
That's right.
but the property
It
still
hasn't been
vacant, there's
developed.
been no improvements on the property.
Yeah, sorry, it could just be a matter of just a turnover from where that permit was issued to where they're still getting their financing together or something like that.
Well, let me ask you this, do we have a sunset on, building permits?
I believe we definitely do. I don't know what that timeframe is. It's
Well,
a year.
what?
Yeah, I thought it was a year, yeah.
Well, good, because some of these older developments, you know, if it's got a building permit 10 years old, we sure don't want somebody to try to pick it up and go forward with that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I don't, that definitely wouldn't happen.
Okay.
So,
Good.
something
Looks
for you
good.
guys to know. I can, so it'll be on the city's website and
It's a
you
great
guys can view it
resource.
there.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, any other comments, Ron?
Nope, that's it.
Well, this brings us to public comments. Anybody wishing to make comments to the commission, please come forward at this time and state your name and address and limit your remarks to 3 minutes, but if you want to go more than that, feel free.
I think we outweighted everybody.
Yeah, we probably have, so. Okay, I see none, so we'll close the public comments. Tom, do you have any other comments that you want to make? So, or our Ward 4 council member, anything you want to comment? Okay, well,
I move we
7:11.
adjourn.
Is there a second?
Before we adjourn, I just wanted to also thank Chris for this painstaking work, for the explanation in there. That was very helpful to me, being new to the commission, and, all the staff's hard work.
Very good, very appropriate.
They do work hard.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning? We are adjourned at 7:11, or 7:17.
Wasn't that fun?